One thing that always gets people's attention when we talk about is the self-directed IRA.
Yeah.
So I wanted to talk about that because, we talk about real estate a lot on this show.
Yeah.
And we bring on different real estate investors and things of that nature. And we always, have to give people different options. So funding, when it comes to funding, that stops a lot of people from investing in real estate. So we, talk about 203K loans and hard money loans and conventional loans and things of that nature.
Yep.
But another way that people can invest in real estate that not a lot of people are fully familiar with is via their retirement account, right? Because if you think about it, I spoke about this before, for the average American, middle class American, lower middle class, whatever, they don't have a tremendous amount of money saved in a savings account. They don't have money. They might probably have no investment outside of like retirement. Like they don't have.
I know people straight up that don't know what an IRA is.
Well, yeah, that. But I'm just saying, as far as the money that they have saved is in retirement. Mm-hmm. So it's not uncommon for a teacher to have $500,000 in their pension plan or their 403B plan by the time they retire. Or it's not uncommon for somebody to work in corporate America for 20 years and to have $400,000 or even like $100,000 in a couple years. Like it adds up. The good thing with 401ks is that the money is taken right out of your paycheck. Mm-hmm. So it's easy. Everybody knows about it. Like when you sign up for a job, they sign you up for it. And then if you work, like I said, with a union job, you have a pension. People have money in retirement accounts, long story short. Yeah. And that's the one place where a lot of people, that's like their only source of like real
if you
savings.
ask somebody if they're saving, they're like, yeah, I have a 401k.
Yeah. So what happens is that a lot of times what happens, I see all the time, is that people, like they might leave their job or whatever and they want to buy a home and they have an old retirement account, like an old 401k. And what they do is that they cash it out because that's their only real money. Mm-hmm. They cash out their 401k and they use that for a down payment or they use that to buy a home. The problem with that is that now not only do you deplete your retirement account, but you get taxed crazy. Like if you take money out of a retirement account before 59.5, for most retirement accounts, you pay a 10% penalty, you pay state tax, and you pay federal tax. So you could be paying up to 55% of the money in taxes, right? So that's a lot of money that's you're liable for.
We had a tax issue in this house, man.
Yeah, so it's important to understand that. So a lot of times people don't fully understand that you can actually use retirement money to actually purchase property, right? So how you do that is via what's called a self-directed IRA.
So before we go there, right, because this is important, what's the difference between an IRA and a self-directed IRA?
So, all right, an IRA is what it stands for is an individual retirement account. Right. I think we spoke about this in another episode one time, but so IRA can be set up two different ways. You can set an IRA up just with money out of your pocket. And like you can fund it every year. Like if you are self-employed or if your job doesn't have a 401k or if you make under a certain amount of money, you can just put money into an IRA every year, right? Like you put like $6,000 to an IRA.
There's a max on it?
Yeah, for the year.
Okay.
But now what's very popular is what's called an IRA rollover. Okay. So what happens is that now you leave your job, right? And now you have an old 401k, an old pension plan, an old 403b, whatever, TDA, whatever. And you can roll that into an IRA, right? So the reason why it's called a rollover is that it's going from what's called tax qualified vehicle to another tax qualified vehicle. You're not paying any taxes on it. It's for your retirement. Right. Only difference is that the 401k is set up by your job. The IRA is set up individually. Okay. You can set up, with a bank or through a financial advisor or, online. There's different ways to set it up, right? So most of the time, when people do IRA rollovers, they're rolling it into what's called the traditional IRA. Okay. The traditional IRA is invested in more traditional investments.
Like stocks,
mutual funds, things of that nature. Okay. Right? So it's invested like in the stock market, in bonds, things of that nature, and it grows over the course of time. So let's say you had a job, you worked at AT&T for 15 years, you have $100,000 in a 401k. You left. So now when you leave your job, the 401k is pretty much frozen in a sense. Not frozen where it's not growing. It's still growing relative to how the investments do. But you can't borrow from it, right? You can't add money to it. You don't have any advice on it. You're not working there anymore. And a lot of times people move and they don't update their address, so it becomes difficult to manage if you're not working there anymore. So this is why the rollover is so appealing, because now you get to pick and choose your investments. You can add money to the IRA if you want. You can work with somebody that can help you out, like an advisor, things of that nature.
Right.
So that's what the IRA. You're just taking control over the money. So now you have it in the IRA, all right? So now, as it's in the IRA, it can be invested in, like, let's say it's invested in mutual funds, right? Or an annuity or whatever.
Those are just the regular IRA.
Traditional.
Okay.
So the money's invested. You're not paying any taxes on it as long as it stays in. And it's just like how it would be with your 401k, except you're kind of picking and choosing investments for yourself.
Okay.
So that's the easy.
So like, if I'm not picking it, then it would be a financial advisor, or like I saw, like a custodian?
Most of the time, it's through like somebody that'll help you out with it. Okay. So whether that be a financial advisor, whether that be somebody at a bank, credit union, or usually you could do it yourself too. If you go online, like you can Fidelity, but a lot of time people just don't feel comfortable doing things themselves. They might want help, so somebody will help you out with it, and they'll kind of guide you on like what makes sense. This is a good investment, and this is the reasons why, things of that nature. So that's what most people do. Like probably like 95% of the people, they'll roll their money into a traditional IRA. But another option that you have is that you can roll it into what's called a self-directed IRA. So traditional IRAs allows you to invest in traditional investments, like I just said. The self-directed IRA allows you to invest in a broad range of different things. Yeah. Everything from Bitcoin to commodities.
There's a bunch of possibilities.
All kinds of different stuff. And one of the things...
I saw somebody said like you can invest in a horse holding firm. Like,
yeah, you can invest in all kinds of different things with a self-directed IRA. And one of the most popular things that people use self-directed IRAs for is real estate. So a self-directed IRA allows you to invest money in real estate, right? So what happens is that now you have that $100,000, and instead of like, if you don't roll it into a traditional IRA, you can roll it into a self-directed IRA. Now that self-directed IRA, you can buy a home, or you can buy an apartment or whatever, or use that money to, buy different forms of real estate. And the money's not taxed, because the whole point of keeping it within the IRA is that you're avoiding paying tax.
Tax when you take it out, or
tax when you take it out. When you take receipt of it, we call taking receipt of the money, right? Yeah. So like when you take receipt of it, that's when the money goes to your bank account. Like when you physically receive it, as long as it's under the umbrella of the IRA, you never actually you don't have receipt of it. So you're not paying any taxes on it. That's the benefit of rolling a 401k into an IRA and keeping it in the IRA, right? You're not paying any taxes. Because whenever you take money out, you're going to get taxed. If you take it out prematurely, you get a 10% penalty tax. But at any point in time, you take money out of an IRA or 401k, you pay a state and federal tax. The federal tax is what federal tax bracket you're in at that time, and the state tax is depending on what state you're in. Gotcha. And it's treated like ordinary income.
And you can borrow that at any time, but just know that there's going to be a penalty.
Borrow what?
You can borrow money from the IRA?
You can't borrow money from the IRA. You can take money once a year from the IRA, but it's a 60-day rule where you got to put the money back in.
Ooh, okay, good to know.
So what happens is that with the self-directed IRA, right, now you can use that money stays in the IRA, but you can buy real estate. Okay. So like let's say you used $100,000 and you bought a home. You used all of it to buy a home for $100,000 in cash, right? Yeah. So now that $100,000 is pretty much like your retirement. So the $100,000 grows to $200,000 over the course of time. You're not paying any taxes as it's growing, right? So you sell that home. Now you made $100,000 profit, right? Now you put that back into the self-directed IRA. Now it's not taxable. Now you have $200,000. Now you can buy more real estate, or you can invest something else, right? Okay. So it's another way to invest in real estate with your retirement account, as opposed to investing with, like, a lot of times people think that they have to cash out their retirement to invest in real estate, because most IRAs will not allow you to invest in real estate except for a self-directed IRA.
All right, so what's the process of setting up an IRA? Because you're doing it yourself, I'm assuming, right? Self-directed.
Self-directed IRA, yeah. So the process to set up an IRA, period. This is the process to set up an IRA. You do an application for the IRA company, right? So now that sets up your IRA account. So like, let's say you set up an IRA with Franklin Templeton, right? You're doing a application with Franklin Templeton, and you're setting up an IRA, right? Now you have an IRA number. Let's say it's 13570. That's your IRA number. You have an account. All of that stuff is set up, but it's not funded yet. Okay. So what happens is that now you have to do a conference call with the 401k company. That's usually the easiest way. You do a conference call, And usually, like, you do it with your advisor if you're working with an advisor. And like most companies nowadays, like Fidelity, they'll do it over the phone, where they can initiate the transfer over the phone. So you say, okay, I have an IRA. I want to roll my old 401k into an IRA. And they ask you, like, who's the check made out to? You'll say, like, Franklin for John Doe, Franklin Templeton for the benefit of John Doe, right? And they say, like, what's the address? A lot of times they'll send it directly to your house, or sometimes they'll send it to the company. But they'll cut the check. They'll do it over the phone. They'll cut the check. And then you deposit that into your IRA account. Now your IRA is funded, right? Sometimes some companies have paperwork where they have, like, their own paperwork, and you fill out the paperwork, you send it back to the company, and then they send the check. So it depends. Either they do it over the phone or they do paperwork. But that's how you set the IRA up. It's very simple to set the IRA up. It's two-part process. You have an application, and then you contact the company, and you tell the company where to send the money to, pretty much. That's how you set the IRA up. So when the self-directed IRA, it's the same process. It's just that there's less companies. There's, like, mostly trust companies that do this. So, like, with an IRA, there's a bunch of hundreds, probably 1,000 companies that you can do IRA with. It's very, very common, traditional IRA. Everything from insurance companies to investment companies to banks, credit unions. You can set up an IRA with pretty much any financial institution. You can set a traditional IRA up with, right? But there's a limited amount of companies that do self-directed IRAs.
Why is that?
Well, it's just less. You know, I guess it might be. I'm not really sure, but it probably, I'm sure, is more involved.
I mean, when I'm listening to it, it sounds like this is like one of them things. Like, this is strictly for live men. Like, this is not something that the average person. Well, we're
gonna get to that. Okay. We're gonna get to that, the pros and cons, because there's cons like everything in life. But, like, just a few companies, and I'm not endorsing any companies because I don't set up self-directed IRAs for people. Right. But just to kind of give you, like, if you Google self-directed IRAs, there's a lot of companies that'll come up. Yeah. So, like, Equity Trust, Gold Star Trust, Intrust Group, those are different companies. But like I said, you could just Google and do your own research. Yeah. Not to give those companies, like, any endorsement. But that's just,
they ain't got a check.
That's just that's just a couple of companies' names.
When would be a good time to consider doing a self-directed?
So before we even get to that, how you set up the self-directed IRA is that you go online, right? Or you contact them, and you set it up with them, and they'll walk you through the process of, like, who the check needs to be made out to. They'll give you an account number and all of that. So it's the same thing I just explained, but you have to do it yourself. Okay. As opposed to, like, a lot of times with the IRA, you have help because an advisor will help you out.
Somebody sitting there with you.
Yeah, most of the time. But in this process, you're gonna have to, like, kind of navigate this yourself. So of course you want to be properly educated. Yeah, man. You want to do your research. But the thing with the show is just to provide information. It's not to say to do one thing or another. Yeah. But it's just to provide information. So there's some drawbacks with with self-directed IRA, because the thing with the self-directed IRA, like, if you have a regular IRA, right? Now the money's invested in the stock market. You don't really have to do anything. Like, I mean, you can just monitor it and make sure you're in a good fund or a good investment, but it's not going to cost you, like, money, right? Like, if you buy a real estate property, if you buy a home, right? Now you buy that home for $100,000, but it's not like you just let that go, because now the boiler might break, right? So now you got to pay money to fix the boiler. Right. Or the house might need to be painted. Now you got to pay money to fix. There's upkeep in the house. No matter what, there's still upkeep. You got to cut the grass. There's always going to be something. So it's going to cost you money. Exactly. It's important for people to understand that. It's buying a house is going to cost you money.
Tell me
there's no way around it. Yeah. So when you have your retirement account tied into that, a lot of times people, you're not investing your 401k into an IRA, a regular IRA, with the expectation that you're gonna have to pay $5,000 a year just to keep up that IRA. There's fees involved with an IRA, but that's taken out of the amount. It's not like you're coming out of your pocket. With a house is different, right? Yeah. Also, a lot of times people buy homes, and the especially with investment properties, they're doing that to actually have income. So they buy a home and they want to have income come from that, right? To, like, support their lifestyle. Yeah. But any money that you generate from the self-directed IRA property has to go back into the self-directed IRA. If it doesn't, then you get taxed on it. So that's also important for people to understand. It's more of a long-term play. Yeah. So, like I said,
that's not include, like, obviously your primary residence, I'm assuming.
Primary residence what?
When you're investing in real estate, or could it be?
Nah, it could be anything. It doesn't have to be your primary residence. Okay. It could be a rental. It could be a primary. It could be different things. But it's just like all things in life, you want to put together a game plan. Right? You want to put together a game plan. You want to be fully knowledgeable. But like I said, the whole point of the podcast is just to give information.
Yeah, I'm learning right now.
and then from the information, then you can decipher and say, okay, this makes sense. But a lot of times we're forced into doing things because we don't know. Mm-hmm. So for most people, the self-directed IRA probably wouldn't be the best fit because there's more work involved, everything that I just named. But in some cases, it could potentially make sense. So just wanted to let people, I spoke about that in a few different settings, like live settings, and it always gets a good reaction. So I wanted to cover that in a podcast, and I knew that, today, obviously, that we didn't have a guest. I thought it would be a good time to actually cover that topic since we talk about real estate so much.
Rashad, I want to thank you for coming, man. This was this has been a learning experience. Like, just when you think you know somebody.
That's a fact. Follow me on the gram.
My graduates from my school being Forbes, bag drop.
Bag drop.
A mic drop, bag drop.
Bag drop.